Welcome to the Nutrition Table. This is an ambitious strength podcast built to kick down nutrition barriers for everyday humans, such as knowledge, time, and money. We aim to kick nutrition myths to the curb and help people understand how they can eat better, to feel better, perform better, and be better. What is up, everyone? Welcome to episode 4 of the Ambitious Strength Nutrition Table. Pretty sure it's episode 4. Today, we are going to chat about butter versus margarine. But first and foremost, I want to talk about a common theme that's probably going to come up throughout probably most or many of these podcasts, and that is that research is ever evolving, and so we have to sometimes let go of our opinions and thoughts that we've had in the past. Research is not bulletproof because it's conducted by humans, and humans are subject to bias. And this bias can bleed into the research. Now we attempt to create tools that can eliminate this bias and things that can measure these things that we're typically assuming. And this is why we start to get different answers, is because we are further eliminating a bias that we had beforehand and opening almost a new light, breaking down a smokescreen to what's really true. So for right now, what is true? I want to start by saying both butter and margarine are pretty demonized. Because they're fats, and you have obviously these different fads, and I'll eventually get to all of them, but the low fat fad, people who think fats are bad, and are creating cardiovascular disease, creating plaque in your arteries, right? All the things that we've heard of, or these scary stories we've heard of about heart disease and what happens with overconsumption of fats, quote unquote. So let's start by talking about what are fats. Well, when we think of dietary fats, we think of oils or butters, something that we spread. And this is because they're solids or semi-solids at room temperatures. And oils are typically liquids at room temperatures, the spreadables. Okay, let's start with what are fats. Fats are, when we think dietary fats, you're thinking oils or avocados and nuts and seeds, or any oils made from those nuts and seeds. You can also get fats from animal sources, such as dairies. So there's your butter, and the meats from them. We'll talk about the specific types of fats that there are, because there are different types of fats, and what those mean, so that this can be a tool for you to flip over anything that you pick up at the grocery store, to check out the nutrition facts. You don't even actually need to be at the grocery store at this point. You can literally be sitting on your couch or sitting at your desk, and you can Google the nutrition label for any food. So this should be a tool for you to go and use and to practice and start implementing by looking at products that have fat in them, or maybe even Googling which types of foods have higher percentages of different types of fats. Again, I'll go over those types in a moment. But basically, fats are most well known and the most umbrella term for fats are lipids, as understood by all scientists. There's like nutrition, fats is very specific. These are just chains of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They are basically comprised of triglycerides, free fatty acids, phospholipids, and your cholesterols are also considered to be a fat. So what do fats do for us? They provide a very dense food energy. And once upon a time when food was scarce, fats are good because they will provide us energy for a sustained period of time. Another concept you can think about is someone who's going to backpack the Appalachian. There's going to be a risk to reward that you're going to want to weigh between how much you weigh and how much work that is going to, how much more of an increase in work that's going to be with the added weight. But it'll behoove you to have a little bit of body fat on your body, or maybe to consume fats while you're backpacking because of the longevity of it. This is going to provide a lot of pack for your punch. You're not going to need to consume a lot of it to get energy out of it, both in the body and in the pack too. So there's two levels to this. But you may want to go in a little bit on the higher body fat percentage side so that your body can utilize some energy, some of this stored energy, because you'll be consuming less calories. It's just as simple as that. You cannot carry the amount of food that you would eat when you were at home. You just can't. It would not be beneficial at all. You're actually slowing yourself down and doing yourself a disservice. There's a really, really specific risk to reward ratio. So fats provide thermal regulation. They can obviously hold body heat in, so especially if you're in the colder months up north, going on with a little bit more body fat might be a good thing. Provides energy storage, like I talked about. Fats also help with brain function and development. It's why they recommend high-fat diets for babies with things like breast milk, which is really high in fat, and therefore moms consuming high high-fat diets. For the most part, our own body can produce most of the fats that it needs in order to function, except for a few essential fatty acids. I'll talk more about those later and what they are and what category they fall under. All right, let's have some fats 101. I'm going to break down dietary. We're just talking dietary. I'm not going to bring any more chemistry or anything into this, maybe as a little bit of a comparison. So we have unsaturated fats, saturated fats, and trans fats. We're going to start talking about unsaturated fats, which are highly underconsumed by most people. Pro tip, these are going to be the ones that you're going to want to substitute with the other fats in order to take steps towards a healthier diet and nutrition and food consumption. I'm not trying to demonize any of these. You can actually could probably consume quite a bit of the other two and still be healthy. There are very, very many examples of people consuming diets that are high in saturated fats and still not having health risks or biomarkers that are indicative of health risks. Cholesterol has a lot to do with this. So ultimately, this is going to come down to your cholesterol levels, specifically your LDL versus your HDL. And that is probably going to dictate where you should prioritize most of your fat intake. And again, I say prioritize most of your fat intake. There's no need to eliminate both, as the research shows. But everything is relative. So if you're looking to move towards the healthier lifestyle, not eliminating fats is important. Rather, substituting unsaturated fats for those other saturated and trans fats. These unsaturated fats tend to increase your HDL and decrease your LDL. HDL being your good cholesterol, quote unquote. LDL being bad cholesterol, quote unquote. Although HDL contributes to higher total cholesterol levels, higher levels of HDL, that healthy cholesterol, that's not what it stands for. It doesn't stand for healthy. It's high density. But those tend to serve as a defense mechanism inside your blood. So having higher levels of those actually is a positive thing, which is why consuming more unsaturated fats isn't harmful as compared to saturated and trans fats. It's also why consuming fats in general is important, especially with what they do for us. Okay, unsaturated fats are things like nuts, seeds, vegetable oils. They're all plant-based. They're typically liquids at room temperature because they contain a carbon-carbon double bond in that chain. You can break unsaturated fats down into two more sections, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated. So either having one double bond or multiple double bonds. Monounsaturated comes from things like avocados, olive oils, almonds, pecans, and hazelnuts, pumpkin and sesame seeds. Whereas polyunsaturated comes from flax seeds, fishes, sunflower, corn, and soybean oils, walnuts. Again, these dietary fats enter our bloodstream and have an effect on our actual cholesterol levels. So it's not the fats in our bloodstream that are bad. It's how these affect our cholesterol levels. Unsaturated fats tend to decrease that LDL, the bad cholesterol, and increase the HDL. So therefore, most human beings should look to consume more unsaturated fats as compared to saturated fats, and potentially create that trade or that shift. The big problem that lies within is that people tend to eliminate saturated fats and they trade those in for more refined carbs or other things that aren't necessarily great for them. And that's where it gets the bad reputation. Because refined carbs are not going to be good in your cholesterol levels either. It is going to increase that LDL and decrease that HDL. All right, saturated fats typically come from your animal protein sources, coconut and palm oil. So again, everything is relative. If you are eating a lot of animal protein sources and you know that you're eating high fat rather than lean animal protein sources from things like, lean protein sources being things like chicken and turkey, which still have some saturated fat but lower relative to meats, red meats, your beefs. So if you know that you consume a lot of those higher fat animal protein sources, whatever your diet or nutrition strategy allows for amount of fats consumed, whatever total fats you're allowed to consume, subtract the amount of fats that you're getting from those animal protein sources, and the remaining fats should probably come from unsaturated fats. So that would be someone that I might suggest use something like a margarine or soybean oil, something made out of a soybean oil. Like, I can't believe it's not butter, because they're consuming a lot more saturated fats and their total diet is missing more of those unsaturated fats. Again, everything is relative. Maybe I have someone who's read so far into all of this and they are team margarine and they don't eat any animal protein sources. Well, let's not say that, because then they're vegan and then they won't consume butter, but let's just say they're averse to meats, but will drink things like milk or consume things like butter. I might suggest that they have butter, although it's higher in saturated fat, because they might need a little bit of saturated fat in order to even increase their fat levels in their diet. Now, that might not be your typical person, and that won't be everybody by any means. But there's really no real evidence that saturated fats have the same effect on your cholesterol levels as things like trans fats. Although it's not great for us, I will always say everything in moderation. So if it means you have to give up saturated fats and you're including refined carbs in your diet, it's not worth it. Throw the butter on there. Give up the cupcake. which has butter in it, and put a slab of butter on your toast. All right. Finally, there are trans fats, and this just has to do with a rotation of the chain of molecules. These are what people, or what scientists call partially hydrogenated, which means you would, in the lab, they are forcing hydrogens onto the chain, creating it to be a little bit more saturated. And in this process of heating it up and high temperatures, it twists. And this is the one that is the real issue for breakdown and creates that disparity between LDL and HDL. The trans fats tend to increase our LDL and decrease our HDL, further increasing our risk of developing cardiovascular disease. Yes, there's research on this. So the research is still out on saturated fats, but what we do know is that consuming more unsaturated fats can help us to negate some of those side effects of some of the saturated fats we might consume in our regular diet. All right. So butter is demonized because it is higher in saturated fats. So for 1 tablespoon of butter, it's 100 calories. There's 11 grams of fat, 7 of which are saturated, and 0.5 of which are trans fats. Now, because saturated fats have been demonized, and the research has since showed that that's not true completely, to an extent, again, moderation. Yes, the American Heart Association suggests 7% of your diet, no more than 7% of your diet, be saturated fats. So you can do the math. You can have as much, if you can have 7 grams of saturated fat because the rest of your fat does not come from unsaturated, then have at that slab of butter. Margarine for 1 tablespoon, this is Land O'Lakes, is 100 calories, same amount of calories, same amount of fat, 11 grams of fat, 3 grams of saturated fat, so you've more than halved it, 0 grams of trans fat, 3 grams of monounsaturated, and 5 grams of polyunsaturated. All right, now let's talk about I Can't Believe It's Not Butter, which uses soybean oil. Total calories is 35. This is their light one. Total fat is 4 grams, so cutting most of the fat out. Saturated fat is 1 gram. Polyunsaturated is 2. Monounsaturated is 1. So obviously with the complete calorie decrease, you expect less total fat to be in there. So let's talk about a few scenarios on where we might fit some in each, and a few people who might have certain diets that they can expose these into, and that might be a good thing, or where they should look to come from. All right, so Fred is a financer. He works a day job. He's sitting at a desk, and he typically consumes red meats for most of his meals, and he uses coconut oils to cook whenever he does. He's already getting a lot of saturated fats. So I wouldn't suggest that he puts butter on his steaks or on his vegetables. If his goal is to lose weight and to drop fat, and he's on a training regimen, I might suggest that I Can't Believe It's Not Butter, that lower caloric density option that also offers monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, which are going to increase his HDL and decrease his LDL. Now that's especially of concern with the low activity and if there is severe overweight. Especially with all the other metabolic aspects that will start to play into that. Now you have Camilla, who has been on the margarine bandwagon for a while and only puts margarine or I Can't Believe It's Not Butter on anything she eats. She's getting a little bit of saturated fat if she's using margarine. She's getting very minimally if she's using I Can't Believe It's Not Butter. I would say if she prefers a slab of butter on her toast in the morning, that would be okay. Considering that she doesn't already have contraindications. Like high LDL. Which she shouldn't if she's being honest about her diet. Or eating lots of coconut. Some margarines can be high in trans fat because of the process, so you have to keep an eye on that. That's why I say look at the label. This is why I want just this information to be a tool and something in the back of your mind that you use to decide whether or not this fits in your diet. And we have to zoom out big picture. You have to think about all of the foods that you eat. So if you're someone who eats a ton of fish, only margarine, go ahead and throw a slab of butter on your toast. If you really want to put some, I can't believe it's not butter on there, like, go for it, but honestly, it's not really worth it. Just account for these things in your diet. Life's a game of give and take. If you like the taste of butter, put it on. But make sure that you're looking at the bigger picture and you understand where it's coming from. P.S. Like, don't get your panties in a bunch about unsaturated fats either, because lard is also a monounsaturated fat. But like when you eat cupcakes that are made with lard, if that was your only diet, that wouldn't be good either. It's just less percentage. So like avocados and olive oils and provide a lot more unsaturated fat per gram. So zoom out, big picture. What do you consume already? Do you know what your cholesterol numbers look like? Can you use those to help you decide, and this information that I've provided for you to help you decide whether or not you should use butter or margarine? What's up, everyone? Did you find this information helpful? Subscribe to this page for updates. I'll be dropping a short video weekly on how to navigate the abundance of nutrition information out there. Follow me on Instagram at ambitious_strength_. Sign up for The Table. This is my ambitious nutrition group, an inner circle that covers recipes, how to eat affordably, kicks myths to the curb, and talks about getting results while still staying healthy and living life.